my first time speaking at a TED conference. Before this, I've spoken at multiple events, but that was as a panel. And I'll give my introduction later, but I want to start with something. So I've come yesterday here for practicals, and I just have a question for you. Like, how do you guys, manage to travel this long? I was, coming from Banjara Hills. When I started seeing a speaker, and by the time I reached, Kompally, I've skipped 5 videos. I've watched 5 videos, and still the college didn't come. So if I have enrolled to this college, I think by the time I would have reached the college, I would have straight away went to the principal office and say like, sir, degree de do, 4 years, 2 semesters ho gaye. So I want to talk about, something that we do on a daily basis, something that we do every day. So a quick question to an audience, what do you think is the most expensive thing a person owns? So I'll tell you, the most important thing a person can own is an idea. It's not the clothes, it's not the car, it's not the house. All those things can be just disappeared, and I can make it back next year. So with that, I want to start my talk. So I'm talking about the most expensive thing that we own is an idea. So let's start with thinking. So what is thinking? So thinking is an invisible labor that we do every day. So it happens off the back of our mind, but we are extremely short of understanding how this thinking actually happens. So I want you to take you behind the roadmap of how thinking turns into a belief. There's a picture of a person sitting in the car and a building in a court. So what do you think is the most expensive thing in the image? My name is Mohd Shaik Abdulla, and I am a founder of a creative media called TPMX. This is not my first time coming to CMR. CMR, I have been, I graduated from JNTU in 2015, and right after my graduation, I went to work with Abhyas. So in 2016, right after my engineering, I came to CMR to take a verbal sessions. And I think I was in the same campus in July 2016, and then a decade later, I'm here giving my first talk. So that's like, life has a way of showing things around. So the framework of the idea is any idea that you have. Every religion, every startup, every relationship starts with an idea. And the base for an idea is a mindset. There's a framework for it. How I feel that, we have borrowed ideas, we have believed ideas, and we have chosen ideas. What do I mean by it? What are borrowed ideas? So when you're born, you see people, you see the environment, you see the, people come and talk to you. When you see your mom, you get the idea of love. When you see some person shouting, and you get the idea of conflict. So you borrow all the things from the environment, and then, that's where, at the stage where you borrow all the ideas. The next stage, I call it the believed ideas. So what are believed ideas? So let's suppose when you are an adolescent, when you enter into inter-college or engineering college, you have the lot of ideas which you have borrowed from your parents, from your teachers, from your friends. So when you go into a college, you then start realizing, okay, this idea is true, so I'll stick to this idea. So you start believing hard in one idea that you have borrowed. So that is the borrowed phase. The college, the Arjun Reddy movie that you have seen. So he borrowed the idea that masculinity, if I be strong, if I do this, I go on to 10 good guy. So the third framework is the chosen ideas. So what are the chosen ideas? You're done with your college. Now you got your placement. You're working at somewhere, and when you start working, no longer the borrowed ideas help you. No longer the ideas that you believe it help you. So here, all the framework collapse. Now you have to make your sense of it. So how do you do it? Then you start telling people, this is me, this is my role, and this is my house, and this is what I do. So that is the chosen mindset. So in any given person, there are three things. It's a mixture. It's I'm standing here, I've chosen to be a speaker, and I have certain belief ideas about what I've bought about TEDx. And when I was at my initial stages, I have borrowed few ideas from the speakers that I got. So 2 speakers that influenced me most in my last year of engineering, I heard to a talk of Sir Ken Robinson. So if he had a talk on school creativity. So I related to the talk, because when you're speaking about how the education system is failing students, so how the industrial evolution. So before industrial evolution, the schools were confined to, the Hindus used to go to mandirs, the Muslims used to go to madrasas, and the Christians used to go to churches. So that was the education system. When the Industrial Revolution has come into picture, the whole system has changed. They were like, we need people who can work on the battlefield. We need people who can heal people. We need people who can advocate for people. So that way, the whole educational system has come into picture post-Industrial Revolution. So talking about Ken Robinson, that idea influenced me much. I was like, okay, so why there is no experiential learning? During my engineering, I have done a project with IIT Kharagpur. So the project was on, we have to build a plane. So it was in 2011, my first year. So I have to build a plane and take it to Kharagpur and demonstrate that how I have built it, and there are challenges that I have to solve. So with a team of 2 people, so I was basically in a fast track batch of my inter. So I picked people with whom I've studied my inter, because I know that their basics in physics were very strong. So I picked people who had very strong basics in physics, and I took them and I built a plane. It took me like 40 to 50,000 to build a plane, and we traveled all the way to Kolkata. We exhibited the show, and it was when I saw the audience, I was like, okay, so a guy from Warangal, going to Kolkata and giving this thing, I was mesmerized, because I got second in the competition, and that has boosted my morale. So then, this Ken Robinson idea again hit me. I was like, yeah, we need a education which is more of an experiential and which puts you on the field and where you apply. So then, there's another talk which I'm influenced by. So it's by Alan de Botton. He talks about philosophy. He talks about, how we are, victims of snobbery. So if you want to understand in depth, you have to go through the TED talk. But I'll give you an idea how what he has told. He told us that the root of everything is philosophy. Everything is trying to be philosophical, but philosophy is above everything. It's the mother of everything. So you go to the basic, you question it. So these 2 people have made me understand how the world works. And when I went to Kharagpur to make the challenge, it helped me understand. Okay, I have a belief that IITs make me this thing. That was a borrowed belief. I chose to be at the IIT because I wanted to represent myself. So that put me at a world stage where I can talk or deliver something which the world wants. So that was my first introduction of how the world works and to go about it. What is the first memory that you have? For most of the people, it's the mother's smile. If you agree, please raise hands. So do you think the first memory an infant has is the mother's smile? Yeah. So what else in the infant stages, what all ideas that we borrow from the environment? Do you think a child is a mirror of what happens in an environment? Let's suppose if there are a couple of people who are shouting in the house every day, fighting about small things, do you think it affects the child? So why do you think that happens? Yeah, I think you are there. So see, the one thing that about the borrowed ideas is that you don't borrow ideas based on the value. You borrow it because the people, see, for a kid, the environment is the mother and the father. So he borrows ideas from them, whoever comes to them. So this is the adolescence phase where you are sorting through. You have couple of beliefs. You have borrowed a lot of beliefs in the the lifespan that you have lived. Let's suppose 15 years or 17 years. So what is the one most big idea that an adolescent has? What is the idea that adolescent carry mostly? So in these days, it's the social media. So how much influence does the social media has on an adolescent life? 90%? Who agrees with me? So in today's world, the adolescent is going through a cognitive overload where there's a lot of information influx from a smartphone. So in this phase, we build lot of ideas that we start to believing. I had my cousin who started believing this guy who talks about Illuminati. I was like, I was not able to get an understanding of what does Illuminati do. You come into, you clear your IIT, you get into IIT, that is Illuminati itself. But what is this Illuminati? I was not able to understand. So a lot of people in this age, in this time, are borrowing ideas from the internet, and social media is changing the way that we borrow idea. Can we go to the next slide? So this is the phase where, I think it happens for most people depending on the circumstances. For me, it happened when I was 25. Because my father was working in Gulf, he came back, so I have to take the responsibility of the home. And all of the things that I had, the ideas that I borrowed, the ideas that I believed, have collapsed. So I have to look after my home, I have to work. So that is the age when I started realizing, none of this works. I have to choose my things. These are my people, this is my job, this is my home, and I have to work towards it. In my 20 to 25, I was traveling a lot. Every 3 months, I was going out. Either I was in Sri Lanka or either I was in Vietnam. So I was traveling a lot. And I spent a lot of money. And my mom used to keep saying that, if you have saved that money, you would have bought a plot. And by now, the plot would have been doubled. So yeah, the idea that I've borrowed have drastically shifted when I hit 25. So as I was telling you, we are not, one person. We don't have only believed or only borrowed. We are a mixture. We have some percentage of borrowed, some percentage of believed, and some percent of chosen. At any given time, a person has. If I'm talking about myself, so speaking at the TED conference was 50% chosen, 40% borrowed, and 10% believed. So that is the mixture that right away I'm doing it now. But going forward, it's a good decision because I have chosen this. The 50% of this is what I've chose to be. See, I don't categorize personalities based on like what people call introvert and stuff. A lot of people used to say like, are you an introvert? I was like, maybe I am in this circumstances, but if you explore a conversation, I'm no longer an introvert. So what happened during my engineering is, I got into boxing. And that has helped me understand how you can, shape your physique. When I got into boxing, I just not only did boxing, but I excelled in it. I played for the JNTU level for my weight, and I got to the semi-final. And this nose crack is because of what I had in the boxing career. But the boxing that I had for 4 years taught me how to be a person in shape and go to the world with the chosen ideas. So that is one perspective that has changed my life to look at life. And I feel that a lot of people who have this mixture of the borrowed, believed, and the chosen are not able to find. There's a gap. They have an idea, they have a life, and there is a gap between the idea and the life of them. And I think this gap is because of, at present day, it's because of the social media, I think so. What do you think? So what is stopping someone live their idea? So my idea of life was to going to McKinsey, working with McKinsey or Bain. So that was my idea. I didn't go there. But did it stop me? No, I'm still going to shows. I'm still, doing market research for big companies. So it hasn't stopped with me. But, most of the people get stopped in this. They live a life, and at the end of their retirement, they think that, oh, I didn't live up to my means. So this gap of idea what you hold, how do you want to live your life, and how you're living, there's a gap. And most of the people don't work towards, closing this gap. So one thing that requires to close the gap is having an understanding, choosing something. So despite of people telling, dude, you are doing good, you're doing this thing, I did a major thing. So I live in a rented house since I'm at Warangal. My home is in Warangal. When I moved to Hyderabad, I moved to, it's been a decade. I moved in 2016. So a lot of people are saying, you should not buy a home in Hyderabad. But I did a conscious decision to buy a home in Hyderabad in Godrej Regal Pavilion. It costed me 1.4. And people were like, are you crazy? Like, the way you are earning and the way you are supposed to be, there's a lot of difference. And see, in an ideal case scenario, someone who buys 1.3 or 1.5C something, he needs to have a income of at least per annum 20 lakhs. So that was the logic. That is the logic. But that as humans, we don't follow logic. Because language doesn't follow logic, it follows emotion. So why I wanted to take that thing is, my friend told me one thing. Dude, in always life, you have to set expectation, no matter how high it is. So the buying a flat was my thing to telling myself, dude, you have to work your ass off. You're not going to stop. You just have to go every day. There is no vacations for you. There is nothing. You have one single agenda, just go towards it. So that is how I have closed club. So here I am today to tell people to you, see, this was the same college I was speaking 10 years before. As a verbal teacher, I was training them grammar, how to crack interviews, how to write the essay. Now here, I'm telling the students, maybe there's different set of students, they have graduated, different set of students, but I'm telling you how to be very conscious of what you have done. And whatever work you do, you have to have a combination. You have to understand what is a borrowed belief, what is a borrowed idea, what is a believed idea, and what is a chosen idea, and keep it a mixture so that your chosen percentage is more. So if you are, someone is pushing you to go into TCS, it's good, but you might be worth to go into, in a government job or crack an IS thing or get into McKinsey or Bain. So choose, make sure the idea, whatever you're chasing, is chosen more. A percentage has to be chosen more. I work into branding. Since I didn't tell you about my background, I work in branding. I've been working in branding since the last 10 years. So how I got into branding is, I was working at, I was doing this verbal thing at CMR since I was working with Abhyas. So one person comes up to me and tells that, you have a good perspective. So why don't you go into the market and tell people, you show the product in this way. And I took that idea. I was like, yeah, whatever if someone is seeing at me has in potential, I was like, okay, let's explore it. So I did a part-time job in the same field. I worked for a startup to do the sales and branding. And eventually we cracked deals with Shaik with most of the international schools. So that guy, the CEO of the company, was impressed, and he offered me a full-time job to work in the branding. And what I understood in branding and working the last 10 years is that, we don't, at the start of my career, I was thinking that I'm creating a perception. I'm creating some value, but it is not. You are just creating a means to connect people to a belief. There is a belief. So Apple didn't create, creativity. It just gave a logo. The same with Nike. Nike didn't create, courage. It gave logo to the courage. So if there is something that I want to leave you with, you people might not remember me, not the day, not what I'm wearing, not what I'm talking, but I want you to remember that it is always the idea you decide to keep. So make sure that you have a good percentage of ideas that you want to keep and choose. Thank you.